Hey, in this video, I'm going to teach you the camera settings needed to capture low-key images. And then I'm going to show you how to convert these regular images into low-key images with post-production techniques in Photoshop. So the question is, are you ready? It's Photoshop time, and you know the drill. Smack it, whack it, and crack-a-lack it.
Yes! That's awesome! What?
Low-key photography is a great challenge for every level of photographer, whether you're just starting out or you've been doing it for years. It's a really straightforward technique that brings out an instant drama to the image. All you need is obviously a camera, possibly a tripod if you're going to do some low-ski landscape shots, one light source, a candle, a flashlight, an external flash, the sun coming in a window. That's ideal. And then some kind of a black background or very dark setting. You see, very little will be visible in a low-key image, so it's important to carefully consider where you want the light to fall. This also means you have to control where the light doesn't fall. Just like all photography, it's all about illumination and elimination. With low-key photography, lighting is reduced in order to produce images characterized by striking contrast, that bright highlight edge, lots of dark tones and shadows. Usually a single source of lighting is used to best achieve this, because dark shadows and strong contrast that come from a sole source of light can alter the mood of the entire scene, making it look more mysterious or ominous. Now, when it comes to the ideal camera settings for low-key photography, you should try to keep your ISO as low as possible and the aperture, the f-stop, as wide open as you can get. And when I say ISO as low as possible, I mean your native ISO. So for most cameras, that's either ISO 100. Nikon's, their lowest native ISO is ISO 200. And then as far as the f-stops, somewhere between f1.2 and f5.6. The lower the better, but clearly if you have a zoom lens that you didn't spend $2,000 on, f5.6 is probably going to be the lowest wide open that you can get, and that is perfectly okay. So start by setting your ISO to 100, or as I said, 200 on a Nikon. Go ahead and immediately choose your most wide open f-stop, which is called your relative aperture, the biggest opening in your lens, which is conversely always the smallest number, because remember, photography was built on inverse relationships because of negatives and positives back in film photography. That's a lecture in another video. Anyway, once you're satisfied with your choice of ISO and f-stop, you basically just adjust your shutter speed to achieve the best exposure for the light intensity in the scene that you've chosen. Now, if possible, switch the camera's metering mode to spot metering. Chances are you're on multi-matrix, possibly even center weighted, but spot metering only uses a small area to calculate the exposure, which means the camera won't take the dark background into account when calculating exposure, but it's only going to count your subject, and that's exactly what you're looking for. If you don't have a spot meter function, then just expect to underexpose the meter suggestions by 2 stops or so. Just check your image and your histogram on your LCD, kind of match them up, making sure you're capturing all the data you need, but that the image isn't overexposed, which is what your camera is going to want to do in a dark scene. So if you want to try shooting some low-key images outside, you can really do it at any time of the day. You could do it during the midday sun if you're indoors and light's coming in a window. Outdoors on a dull, overcast day, you don't have to wait for it to be dark or dusk. So for instance, an overcast day in an industrial urban scene like the one that I'm going to show you provides a perfect backdrop for capturing something that could be read as mysterious and dark. Now, low-key landscapes are not quite as popular as low-key portraiture, but you should give them a try, especially if you like kind of grungy landscape photography. And they look beautiful when they're converted to black and white. Just remember, you probably will need a tripod in case you decide to shoot low-key landscape images, since you probably will not use the widest aperture for landscapes, right? You're going to need a deeper depth of field. So you're probably going to be up around f11, f16, f22, and quite honestly, at that point with your ISO at 100, if it's kind of a darker area, your shutter speed is going to probably drop less than the hand-holdable 1/60th of a second. So yeah, that's where the tripod would come in.
Yes!
So with this image, I would count this as a low-key image because the overall tones are very dark. But I would suggest that typical low-key photography looks more like this. Typically, we think of rim lighting just on the edge so that only one thing is mostly showing. Again, you can just pop over to Pinterest and key in low-key photography for some visual inspiration. I would say that all of these would count as low-key photography. You find it a lot with bodyscapes and portraits. This is a very dramatic, powerful tool to use in your repertoire. But think of like this image. To me, that's a great low-key image, even though it's not the chiaroscuro, just one piece of face illuminated or being backlit. Like anything like this totally totally works. Like this is a great low-key image where there's a lot of information in the scene. It does not have to always be a totally black background. So feel free to take that freedom. And I would suggest that this image, where is it? This one is from a composite video that's in the composite area. It's well lit, but I would suggest that this would fall in the category of a low-key image because it has overarchingly darker tones. Now, granted, it's on the brightest side of a low-key image that I think you can have and still call it low-key. But yeah, so anything from here all the way to, here or here is what a low-key image is. Here's a good example of a low-key landscape. I mean, it's well lit, it's well exposed, but notice how the tones are they're very dark and ominous overarchingly. Like it's overall a very dark photograph. That's what a low-key image ultimately is, where the bulk of the tones are dark and that lighting gives it a sense of mystery and mood that makes the photograph more valuable visually, more interesting. So I would say this could definitely be considered a low-key image, but to me, it's a little flat. So if I were to try to tweak this, I would add a levels adjustment layer. And yeah, look at that histogram. Not a lot of data. So that means when I try to collapse this, there's going to be a lot of posterization. Yeah, do you see this posterization, especially in the blue channel? Because that's always going to be the one that's the most starved. I can hide this a bit by just pulling my black over. And then again, we're doing black and white conversion. So I'll go ahead and add a black and white adjustment layer. And that hid a lot of the problems right there. And this is definitely, I think, more striking low-key image than this one. So just kind of keep that in mind. And actually, I'd hit Command or Control J just to duplicate that black and white and just hit multiply, maybe soft light, just to make that a little bit more contrasty. All right, so let me show you how to actually convert images that aren't shot specifically for low-key, but you want them to be low-key. So with this image, obviously it's overall pretty bright. I'd hit Command or Control J to duplicate my image because I don't want to work on the original background layer. And now I just try this technique. I'd hit Command or Control J again, and I would choose multiply. That's going to systematically make everything darker. Now I know I want to work with black and white conversion, so I'll just make sure I have a black and white adjustment layer or a gradient map, something like that, right on top. So everything's black and white to begin with. So already I have kind of a low-key image. Alt or Option click on that background layer because that'll turn off all other eyeballs and let me just see the one layer that I click on. So already we've created kind of a low-key image. We could push it a little further. I can hit Command, Option, Shift, letter E. It compresses everything to this top layer, as you see. Now I'll hit Command or Control J on that because I'm going to pretend like that's my new background layer that I don't want to, mess up. And I'll pop over to the Adobe Camera Raw filter by going up to Filter and Camera Raw Filter. So in the Camera Raw filter, maybe I would just pop down to the Effects panel and just add a bit of a corner vignetting to keep us in the scene. Make sure I'm not blowing out any of those highlights. Doesn't look like I am. And I could make it just a touch darker by pulling up the dehaze. Click OK. Yeah, I like that. That's totally a low-key image, especially when you consider we came from here. Now let's try another one. All right, so this is a good urban dilapidated structure that's going to convert nicely to a low-key image. My technique, you don't have to do this for you, but I always like to hit Command or Control J immediately so I'm not tempted to or accidentally do anything destructive to my original. With that done, I'm going to go ahead and put a black and white adjustment layer at the top because I know right away that I want this to be in black and white. And I'm going to go back to that duplicated layer, duplicate it again by hitting Command or Control J and just choosing multiply. That's going to automatically pull all the tones down. Now, if it looks too muddy at this point, you have to be careful of that. Maybe choose overlay. That's going to also enhance the contrast. So it's going to give you whiter whites and darker darks, but it's not going to make it look so muddy the way the multiply did. So, and soft light is about half power. And hit Command or Control J again with that blend mode applied. So basically I'm doubling the intensity. Now maybe I want to take a look at changing that to multiply and then adding a layer and just brushing back out at 50%. So first, I've got to have B for the brush. I've got to look at my foreground background color and make sure that black's in the foreground because I need to paint on this white mask and it's not. So I'll hit the letter X. That'll switch the foreground background colors for me. I could also click on this little backwards arrow and then I'll look up at my opacity. It's at 100%. I'll hit 5 for 50% because I just want to hide some of this multiply where I think appropriate. And then you can do the other technique of collapsing everything to the top layer by hitting Command, Option, Shift, letter E. And then I'm not going to duplicate this. I'm just going to pop over to the Camera Raw filter, knowing that this is destructive in the way I'm doing it. I might pull down my highlights just so I don't have those clipped highlights indicated by the red. You can turn that on and off by clicking on this upper right triangle. That will hide that, but that is telling me that I've got clip highlight, so that if I print it, it's going to show paper white, which is never good. So I can pull that down. I can increase my clarity. This is a great scene to give it a bit more clarity and texture. And maybe I will pull up the dehaze a little bit. Have to pull my highlights down a little bit more now because I'm starting to clip more. And then vignette the corners, click OK. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off all these eyeballs. So here's where we started. And if I were to take this original duplicated layer and just hit Command-Shift-U just for a very generic black and white conversion, which is one of the fastest ways to convert an image to black and white, but I would suggest it's like the least best way to do it because it just equalizes your RGB channels. So we took it from here to here, and this definitely has that low-key vibe. Let's try another image. All right, this is super bright, and you wonder how this could be a low-key image, but the subject content is going in that lower key direction. So we're just going to play off of that. Again, hit Command or Control J to duplicate it. I'll add a black and white adjustment layer because essentially we know we want this to go more dark. And I'll see if I have any ability to pull the tones down just by using the color channels. Okay, so now I would go back to this duplicated layer, hit Command or Control J, and just take my blend mode and see what multiply looks like. Actually, I like what it's doing, but I think I'm losing too much of the head of the subject. So I'd add a layer mask by clicking on the add layer mask icon. I'd make sure that my brush is chosen by hitting the letter B. I'd make sure that black's in the foreground because I'm going to be painting on a white mask. And I want to paint it about 50%. So luckily my opacity is still at 50%. So I can just paint on that mask just to brighten the kid up a bit. And so when you're doing this, you have to be really careful that you don't start ruining the Dmax of your image, i.e. this is obviously deep, rich black, RGB 000, right? If I go to the info panel here, let me get a move tool. If I hover over this area right here, do you see the RGB values are 1 to 3? So that's pretty close to 0, right? That's 000. But notice right here where it probably should be dark and it's not. It's 11 and 12. So that's some of the issue you have to be careful of. So when you're painting back out with your mask, just make sure you may have to spot paint, like just to keep that rich black in. So what I'm going to do now is compress all of this to its own layer to treat it as its own individual image. So that now I'll add just a levels adjustment layer, choose the black point eyedropper and say reset everything here to black. Now kind of click until I see, okay, to me that looks like that's working much better. I might pull my output for the white over a little because the whites look a little bright to me. And I like where this is going. I'd say I'm pretty much there. Now, even though these nails possibly are interesting, they're so bright right now that they're visually distracting to me. So for me, I think it would be a good move to remove them. So I'll just choose that spot healing brush, click on each nail head and let Photoshop subdue them and or remove them. Yeah, that's a much cleaner composition. And while I'm here, I will paint over this little leaf just because it's not adding to my image. I don't like that. And that sticks out to my eye, that little one, this one. So basically I'm just kind of cleaning up the area. Command 0 to fit it in the screen. So again, we started from here and we turned it into this kind of dark, moody, low-key image. So again, you're able to convert most images into low-key. So let's use the same techniques for this image. Command or Control J. I'll add a black and white adjustment layer above it. It's gonna be a little harder because this all looks super flat. I can probably pull or dress down with the color slider in the black and white adjustment layer. But ultimately, I'm gonna push all of this up to its own layer, Command or Control J, and I have some options. I can either try my blend modes to get me there quickly. Let me try a soft light, overlay, multiply. Those are going to be my best options, but it's going fairly muddy. This would be a more challenging one to get. So maybe instead of that, what I would try is add a levels adjustment, grab that black point eyedropper and just click on what I think should be pure black. All right, that brought us down pretty quickly as far as making the image more low key really fast. These are just some general techniques to show you how you can kind of quickly pull an image darker to make it look more low key for your shooting. Can't wait to see what you make. Take care.
Yes!
Hey, what are you still doing here? It's over. Actually, all kidding aside, I hope this video helped. And if it did, consider subscribing. I like subscribers.
That's awesome! What? You just took one in the jugular, man! Whoa! Yes! Oh my god, I did! This is
Hey, you stayed to the end. You know what that means? You're awesome. I'm talking about you. Now get out of here.